Generally, you can't do anything without resources. And one of the most important resources is funding.
For sure.
So how do we go about getting funding and where?
Well, one of the places that we could look is with pharmaceutical companies, and Advocacy Beyond Borders would not exist without the generous support from pharmaceutical companies. And they do have a desire to help with equity and quality of life for the people they have treatments for. Nobody wants to have a medicine sitting on a shelf that gathers dust. So the idea of how to do that can be complicated because of the variety and the number of different pharmaceutical companies, their different processes, their different portals, the different way they work, their areas that they will fund and won't fund. So in order to navigate that journey, that's something that we have some resources on the website to help with, and we also could discuss with you after you've had a look at that. If you come back to us, we could talk to you directly to help guide you through that complex maze of possibilities.
And other funding sources also can be accessible for patient support groups, and different countries will have different ways of supporting patient support groups. Our focus, as Lisa's talked about, is specifically around how pharma can engage with you and engage with us and help you achieve the things that you want to achieve.
And I think something to add is there is a timeliness or a period of time that this takes to work.
Yeah.
So these things don't happen overnight, and to be planned and prepared and have an understanding of the processes that you're going to have to be looking at to access potential funding for something that you need, that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and someone who knows all about that is Julie Sini, and Julie's going to share her experience of that with us now. Julie, we've been talking about building strong communities. You built a really strong community at SMA Australia. Why did you do that?
I built a strong community for the future. If no one got in and did it, there would be nothing for anyone in the future to A, hold on to, or B, have something to look forward to. And, you know, to be able to build that community takes time. It takes a lot of hard work, sweat, tears, anger, frustration, but you keep going because there's an end goal. And for me, my end goal was my children. I needed to tell my children at the end of the day that I fixed something that I couldn't fix for them. And that's why I did what I did.
So how would you describe what a strong community looks like?
A strong community looks like everyone's being involved. Everyone's got the attitude of, what can I do to help? How much information can I give you so we can get to the next stage? What input do I need to do so we can get something across the line? And if the community doesn't fire like that, then the community doesn't get what they need. So a strong community is an involved community, and one that is constantly asking questions of, what do I need to do next? How can I do that for you? How can I help you?
So how did you build yours?
So I did a number of different things to build my community. I started with some surveys. We wanted access to medicine, so I spoke to, for example, Jo Watson, who was the consumer rep, and I asked her what information she needed. She said, you need to get A, B, and C from your community. So I went off and I developed some surveys just on Google, just to get people to fill in. And I went out and I got the information that they required. When you're a patient organisation, the information can come a lot quicker. You are able to be more agile, and you're able to collect this information on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. And when you're delivering some outcomes for a review for medicine, you need to be agile. You need to make sure that this information is gathered quite quickly. There's no ethics involved. You've got consent from your person when they fill in the survey through the consent form that's on the survey, And you're collecting this information in a way that you can say, okay, our community, they look like this, they're doing that. This is happening in the real world. It's either backing up the clinical evidence that's already been given by the pharmaceutical company, or it's telling a different story. And the different story is that unmet need. The unmet need of the community looks like this. The community are suffering because of X. So you're painting a real world picture for those in the community to have their voice at a level, at a government level, like HTA or reimbursement.
So you started 18 years ago.
18 years.
And the community, how would you describe the community when you started and the community when you've just recently moved from that?
I've been doing this for 18 years, and the community when I started was small. SMA is a rare disease. There are limited numbers, and I worked tirelessly over that 18 years to gather data. Who's in the community? What does the population look like? What state they're in? And a lot of the first 15 years, for example, or 14 years, was just collecting that data. There was nothing happening. There was no cure. There was no treatment options. There was nothing. Nobody cared. And then there was a sniff of something was coming, and it inspired the community to get involved because they wanted something that I wanted. And I made sure that this data that I was collecting was used in the best possible way. And that way is to, make sure that their voice is being heard. So in the last 5 years, for example, we've now been able to achieve 3 treatments, 3 high-cost treatments. This isn't a Panadol we're talking about. This is a drug that is the highest cost drug, for example, in Australia's history at $2.5 million. They're not cheap treatments. And we got these across the line because of the support of the community that we had in our advocacy.
And what kind of evidence did you collect? What kind of data? How did you get to know your community?
So the data that we collected from our community was a lot of general data to begin with. Where did you live? What age were you? What type of SMA that you had? Did you live at home? Did you have a job? Were you working? Who cared for you at home? Were you living independently? There were a lot of general pieces of information that the government just didn't know about. The population, how many adults were there in the community? How many kids were there in the community? What were things looking like on the ground for SMA in Australia? We had epidemiology numbers, but the epidemiology numbers were so totally different to the actual real world numbers that we gave the government. And when you're giving that information, it's not the matter of 20 cents here, it's the matter of millions. When your drug is $100,000 a dose and you've got 600 in the epidemiology compared to 400, the difference of 200 is billions of dollars. So it's really important as a patient community that you know who's out there so that you can give much more accurate real world data to the payers of the community who's paying for these treatments, to make them save some money. Ultimately, they've got a business to run, and that business to run is providing you with medicine. They want to do that in the most cost-effective way possible. So this information that you're collecting for them ensures that, they can make an informed decision.
And how did you gather it?
So we gathered it through majority Google surveys, so Google Docs. We put out a 10-question survey. Basically, asked a number of different questions. Who cared for you? Where do you live? What type of SMA you had? And then we followed that up with some specific interviews. We used a local support group organisation here in Melbourne called the Genetic Support Network of Victoria. And they had some volunteers that conducted some interviews for us. And we further deep dived into the realm of what it looked like living with SMA as a patient, either a parent with a child or an adult living with SMA. And we found themes, and we reported on those themes and produced a report called our Values and Perspectives Report. And we we put that and sent that to the government, and it was one of the first times actually that the government had referenced a report from a patient organisation group. What the report held weight, and the report was very informative to what the community needed. At that stage, we actually didn't get the drug; it got rejected, but it proved that our voice was heard. And they acknowledged that in their public summary document here in Australia, and that's not often done.
And who supported you? Who did you work with?
So, who supported us in this long journey were a number of different stakeholders. You are not only talking to your patient community, you are talking to government, you are talking to, for example, the consumer rep to the pharmaceutical benefit scheme. You're talking to HTA. You're talking to politicians. Politicians played a huge role in our advocacy efforts when we went to Parliament. You're talking to pharmaceutical companies. You're working with pharmaceutical companies. So the biggest piece of advice or information that I can pass on to anyone listening to this is to develop that relationship early. Don't leave it too late. I actually started 3 years before treatment came to Australia, and I needed every second of that time to make a difference. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's not going to be over in 100 metres. It's going to take you that full 42 kilometres, and that's going to be over a number of years. You're probably going to be doing marathon after marathon for this work. You get frustrated, you get upset, you think you want to give up, but you don't. You get back up, you stay in your lane, and you keep moving forward.
It sounds like it could have been quite overwhelming. How did you actually know what to do and where to start?
Advocacy can be very overwhelming, and it's like putting a puzzle together, actually. You've got to slowly look at every piece and know where to place it. And you might not be able to place every single piece immediately, but you eventually work out which piece is the right one and how that piece can help you in your effort. And again, it's that relationship, following through, talking to the right people, having many different conversations with many different people, bouncing ideas off people who are your sounding board, being frustrated, being angry, having a cry. All these things are okay. It's okay to feel all these emotions. It's okay to have a loss. It's okay to have a win, because the wins are amazing. And I can tell you, every time I had a win, it was like a drug that you'll never ever want to get off, and you just want to be able to do it over and over again. And every time I did it, it just made me more hungry for the next time I could feel that rush. And it gives me goosebumps talking about it, because it's an amazing feeling. It really is.
So how would you describe your relationship now with your key stakeholders?
I believe I have a fantastic relationship with my key stakeholders. They all know me by name. They all know that if I'm looking for them or want to call them or email them, they're there for me. They're saying, how can I help you, Julie? What can I do for you? What do you need? And in a community where we didn't used to be like this, the not-for-profit community, definitely here in Australia, was quite insular, and it was like, oh no, we don't talk to that company, or we don't talk to them. We've evolved. We've learnt to, get this relationship going and, collaborate with a number of different stakeholders to get a desired outcome. And what is that outcome? That outcome is something for someone in 10 years' time that they don't even know about yet. For me, it's making sure that they have access to newborn screening and genetic testing in 10 years' time, that they don't even know what SMA is right now. And, that's why we work with those stakeholders and develop those relationships. It's so important.
So I think now is the time for you to tell your bus story.
So I have a very good analogy, and I say to people, when you're collaborating with someone, you need these number of stakeholders that are with you. And the only way that I can describe that is they need to get on the bus with you. You all need to be going the same way. You all need to have the same desired outcome. And for me, that desired outcome was access to treatment, a national newborn screening program and a national genetic screening program. And anyone who didn't want to be on that bus, get off. Go and do something you're passionate about somewhere else. It's not my bus. So you need to find your people that you want to ride the bus with, because they're out there, they're available, and they want to help you. And if you don't have those people around you, tell them to get off. It's okay to discard. It's okay to say no to someone, and it's okay to say, I'm sorry, you can't help me right now. I have people around me that I need to get what we are set out to do. So get on the bus, start making sure that you're all working towards the same common goal to reach your ultimate, whatever that is. And for me, it took me 5 years for that bus ride, and I have finally got the full circle for SMA, so that no matter what part or journey you are on in the SMA world, you have something that will help you, something that will fix you, and something that will make you living with SMA a little bit easier than it was when my children were alive, because my children's outcome was death. And that's not the face of SMA anymore. The face of SMA is living a good quality of life and one of happy memories for the future.
So how can Advocacy Beyond Borders help getting the right people on the bus?
Advocacy Beyond Borders can work with different communities in different countries so that we can give you stakeholder information, we can connect you with the right people in your own community, in the global community that want to be on your bus as well. You know, Advocacy Beyond Borders is definitely one of those people that want to drive the bus with you. We're right up the front. We don't want to sit down the back and make a ruckus. We want to be up the front. And we want to make sure that we're connecting with you to the people who want to be at the front of the bus with you as well.
So let me ask you about health technology assessment. When someone said that to you, where do you start?
Health technology assessment is a whole different world in itself. I had no idea what HTA was. They didn't even say to me health technology assessment, and I'm just like, what was that? And you literally, well, for me, I literally had to learn modules, and I would take it one step at a time. I learnt what HTA was, what it did. I then learnt the next step on how do I talk to HTA, who do I need to speak to, how can they help me? So I moved through the HTA process, developing knowledge as I went. And if you're listening to this, the HTA process is a massive bucket of fish, and you are never going to be expected to know everything about it in one sitting. You're going to need multiple sittings at it. And I encourage you to speak to as many people as you can and ask as many questions as you can, because it's a moving bucket as well. It's not just a bucket that sits there that you can collect information or put information into. It moves, it's got moving parts, and you have to constantly ask questions. For me, my HTA bonus was Jo Watson, who's the consumer rep. I would go and ask her questions. Why hasn't this medicine been passed? What do I need to do to get it passed? What information are you looking for? So I'm sure that there's a respective HTA consumer rep in any country that you're in, a government body that you're talking to say, what is the best way that I can get my medicine across the line the quickest for me to have access for my community? And for me, my person was Jo Watson, and she would give me, you need to be finding this information out, Julie. And I treated that like a game. I treated it whereas I could get this information. A, how quick could I get it for her? And B, who could I get it from? So I developed a lot of different surveys, interviews, etc. that I went off and I ticked my game off along the way, and I would collect the coins that needed to go in the bucket, and I would come back to Joe Watts and I would say, here's what you needed. So lots of conversations. Again, I cannot stress enough on how good a relationship you need to have with these people. You need to be A, on first name basis, and B, be able to know that they're going to answer your call when you ring them. And every time I would speak to her, Joe gracefully, accepted my phone call and answered many questions. The other thing that we focused on through the campaign, we did webinars, and this was a real big game changer for us. So we brought expert people into the mix, and we showed our community different aspects of what needed to be learnt or what needed to be disseminated to the community. So for example, we would have, a top neurologist doctor come along for children, another one for adults. We would have an information session about newborn screening. We would have an information session from Joe about consumer comments and what went wrong at the HTA process, and how we as a community were doing. And that's a really good connector for the community to make sure that you're getting the right information. You're feeding back, you're saying, hey, thank you very much for what you've given us. This is where it got us to, but this is why you need to give us more information. You can't you need to educate your community enough to say, okay, we've got one set of information from you, but you're going to have to give us another bit of information in 6 months' time. And then you might have to do that again in 12 months' time. Have things changed? Can you walk? Can you not walk? Do you use a wheelchair? Is your carer hours bigger or smaller? We need to make sure that the same thing's happening, or your unmet need is worse. You're feeling better, or you've got access to some medicine and it's changing your life. What's happening? So educating your people about making sure that their information is free flowing and often, and there's no hesitancy about that. Whereas sometimes in the beginning for SMA, the community would turn around and say, I've done that before, don't worry about it. And you can't have that attitude, because if you have that attitude, then it's going to take longer and no one's going to be able to have access to it. So education for your community about why they're giving you the information and how often they need to give you the information is also important.
How did you work with pharma?
Pharmaceutical companies and working with pharmaceutical companies need to happen early. I cannot stress the relationship that you need to have with a pharma to get your treatment through, if that's what it is, or whatever it is. You cannot have not have a long relationship with them. And for me, again, it was feeding them the information that they didn't know about the community, that I could gain from the community through surveys or interviews, that I could then feed back into them and say, X, Y, and Z's happening. And they're like, but the clinical trials don't say that. And I'm just like, but that is actually what's happening in the real world of our community. So they're a conduit. They're not the enemy. People think that pharma are out there to make money. Yes, we're all out there to make money, but pharma are also out there to make sure that you have a good quality of life with the medicine that they've developed. That development of that medicine costs a lot of money, millions and millions and millions of dollars. They have to recoup that somewhere. And when you are living with a rare disease, your medicine is going to be high cost. It is not a Panadol of this world or a paracetamol that everyone can take. There might be only 5, 10, 200 people in your community that have access to this treatment, and that is not a cheap exercise. So pharma aren't the enemy. They're here to help you, and they want to talk to you. They want to have that relationship with you. And I can say that each pharmaceutical company that I worked with were amazing and gold standard. And I hope that there's other pharmaceutical companies out there that I get to work with in the future that have the same level of relationship that I had with these guys. I've set the bar high. So if you're listening to this, then you need to lift your game for sure.
So just finally, communication and marketing have been really important to your success. So how did you work out what your key messages were and how you would best be positioned to advocate for what you and your community were seeking?
Key messages for your community is really important. Before we had our key messages, we were just seen as a really tiny not-for-profit that nobody knew about. We worked with a marketing guy to develop some clear and concise, high-level key messages. They were early access to treatment, a national newborn screening program, and a national genetic screening program. 3 easily achievable goals that we had, that we put on everything. Everyone knew about our key messages, and suddenly we were the peak body in Australia, and there was one of me. There was one person delivering these messages that everyone thought that, you know, I had a massive team behind me. I didn't. So by just we created a few tiles that had these messages on them. By creating this professional look and disseminating those key messages out on all our documentation, people's perception changed of us, and we became a peak body that had key messages that were, you know, a force to be reckoned with, and it changed the ball game of everything that we did, really. It was amazing. It's not hard to do, but you go from 0 to hero in 3 key messages. It's easy. No, it's not easy, but it's crazy.
So if you have implementation needs and you need support from Advocacy Beyond Borders, there is an option to look for that support through pharmaceutical companies, and there are templates that we have available on our website which will help you understand and work on that process to get the money you need to then get the help that we could provide for you.
Yeah, so one of those things is actually a funding application template. Tried and true. We've had some success using this template, as have others that we know have also used this template. You might need to modify it for your environment, but it's a really, really great start. And as I said, that we know has worked.
So when it looks like a massive, difficult, challenging situation of where to start, it can be broken down into small chunks and help to guide you through the process by using some of these resources and coming back with an inquiry to Advocacy Beyond Borders so that we can help you with the next step.